Hello everyone, Revan619 here. Thanks for joining me as we stare out into the abyss of no news of Elden Ring. But whilst we stare out into the great nothingness that is waiting for Master Miyazaki to give us some information on Elden Ring, I've been playing around the Hitbox viewer. Now this was intended to be part of my PvP Basics video, but I felt going through some of these weapon arts and some of these hitboxes that this deserved its own video. So whereas I'm going to explain about spacing, how to counter weapons, different playstyles and stuff like that, and then try and get on some people who are a little bit more of an expert in their field, I thought it'd be cool to just go through some of this stuff separately. One thing I also want to give a quick shout out to is the Watchdog Mod, which I'm going to link in the description below. Basically what this mod does is it detects people on PC using cheat engine, tells you what they're abusing, and gives you a single button option to kick them. I would highly recommend that because we have entered a new age of cheat engine abuse where people are openly bragging about abusing cheat engine to ruin people's saves and etc. Now, before I actually start showing you off these hitboxes, I do want to let you know that this will get your account banned. So back it up, play it offline, and probably don't do too much around with it on your main account because you will lose it. So yes, we'll start off with the roll hitbox. So as you can see here, this little ball that quickly disappears is your roll hitbox. So that's what, if it gets hit, you take damage and get rolled. So you can actually see the general sort of size of it. So that's what people are going to be aiming to hit when you're playing around in Dark Souls 3. So if they get that, you're going to get roll caught, boyo. So that was one of the first things I thought was very interesting. It kind of changes how I view it. Now, I don't know how to bring up just the default standing hitbox. If someone does know, you can let me know below, and that'd be quite useful. But yeah, this sort of changes how I view the hitbox, because it's not actually your character model, it's this orb that's around them. So that's probably going out all the way around you, so that's what you've got to be aware of. So if we start off, like I said before, I've put some pictures out on Twitter, so if you want to see some of these better up and some of them closer or frozen, then you can do that, or feel free to slow down the video as we go through these. So what you've got here, this is the hitbox. So you can see sort of the length of the weapon, and it's a lot different to what you might be thinking. And you've also got your quick step old hitbox here. So you see that little ball there? That's probably generally what your hitbox looks like. So we got the same for, say, the parrying dagger, which is pretty much the same. So this way, we can see really true weapon reaches. So for those who do test that sort of stuff, it will be good for them. But as you can see, the Murky Hand Scythe and the Harp have quite an interesting hitbox. And that's generally how this thing works. So it's, and it lingers a little bit longer if you look at how long that stays there. This is why it's so effective at roll catching. That's what it looks like. Oh, that's got a nice one. Oh yeah, and these hitboxes, now I love you going to say that they're not going to be too accurate because of latency. Now, we all know what latency looks like, and yes, that completely throws these off. So this is just to give you sort of a general idea of what you need to be avoiding, but obviously when it comes to lag, it does change the ballgame quite a bit. Now, straight swords are an interesting one, because if you watch the backswing, if you notice the angle at which it goes, this is the reason why it roll catches so well, because the first hit comes down at that sort of cross motion, but that second back hit, the way it comes out, is kind of what makes it really good for roll catching. So if we start looking at some of the longer versions, that's why jumping attacks are terrible. You can also see how long the active frames are. So when people talk about which weapons are good, you've got the startup, which is the bit before the box, and then you've got the recovery, which is the bit after the box, whereas the box is the active frames. So you can see where your active damage frames are, where the startup and recovery is. That's normally how you tier weapons, of which use those most effectively. And with this, you can also sort of see the sort of length that you're going to be getting per hit on these weapons. And you can see where the active frames are as well when you do each of these hits. And the old cancel has been around for a very long time now. Now, some of the more interesting weapons, like the Valor Heart, when you see what their hitboxes look like, it's really interesting. So if you see where that is, you know the sort of area that you have to avoid when fighting these weapons. Things I find interesting is where you see the great sword like running attack, so you can really see what's the difference between a clean hit and a laggy hit when you get caught by these sorts of things. And you can see why some things are easier to roll than others. Now that's a really interesting hitbox. So if you look at those little bubbles and the little orbs at the top, you can see why there's a knockback. One of the more interesting things is you could also see where the slam hitbox is. So if you've ever been caught by a running attack's AoE, but you're not where that slam is, you can tell if that person you're fighting is just a very laggy indeed. If you're getting caught behind them by that slam, then that's just a bad connection, my friend. And the behind slam on this one is actually quite big. Look at that. If you get caught anywhere in there, you're getting stunned. And you got the old Astora's Greatsword. But if you look where this slam's behind, you see just how big that is. So when you catch people with that charged R2, that's sort of what you got to catch them in for that turn spin. So yeah, when you're trying to avoid this, you need to not be caught by that slam. Here's one that would be fun. So if you notice when it's running, that's what's catching people, is when you get caught by that, is it staggers you. Now this is one that everyone wants to see. Hitbox on the old L1s here. Yeah, when you got people running away from you, if you notice the dagger's little hitbox there, that's what you're often trying to catch people with, or not trying to catch people with if you're setting up different combos. Obviously that's all covered in the weapon showcase videos I've done with this. One of the other good ones is you can really see the sort of lengths that you're getting out of curved swords, and where the nerfs have been with them. Say you look at, say, the Carpus curved sword. Like, even though it's still got like the full length of the blade, the forward momentum is a lot less. So you can see like how much ground you're covering. So if we start from this little step here. Where you end up and where the blade goes. And you even got your little guys. But one of the ones that you do notice differences is the old running attack. You'll cover a lot of ground that way. And here's the big boy. Now, if you notice the angle which it hits and that hitbox comes out, that's why you roll catch so easily on the first R1 compared to straight swords, which do better on the second R1. Angle at which it comes out. Look at the size of that hitbox. Then you look at how tiny that is. No explosion really either. But look at the hitbox in this thing's weapon. Oh, that's what used to knock people down. And you can see the true length of the Demon Skull, which is kind of the old cell swords. Now, the reason one of these weapons are so scary as laggy is normally you can punish those running attacks quite easily, but when you're fighting someone who floats, they're gonna hit you, and they are deceptive. One thing that I did like is you see how much of an radius the R2s have in these. Look at that. Look how big that is. You can catch people. Beautiful stuff. If you look at the hitbox and rapiers, the reason these are easier to avoid than spears is it is completely straight. When I compare this to a spear in a little bit, you'll see what I mean. Why the R2s are pretty good at roll catching, because they come across in this cross motion. So even their running attacks, it's very, very straight. But then if I compare that to a spear, so let me just quickly. Notice the hitbox has this little ball on the end. So it's why spears are harder to run around than, say, a rapier. A rapier you can almost very easily, on a good connection, you should be able to backstab every first R1. But only on a good connection, otherwise it's going to be just as hard. Now, one thing that you used to know is quite funny with katanas is they have this moveset, which is why it's pretty hard to sometimes catch people. But on the running attack, it's got a standard thrust. But then you compare this to, say, a washing pole, and the reason that the washing pole is so much harder to avoid is it actually has two hitboxes. It has the first one, and then a little ball on the end that comes out just at the tip. And it's why this one is so hard to avoid compared to the other ones. And then if you look at the Frayed Blade actually has a wider running hitbox than the washing pole. So yeah, they're both different. And then you've got the Oni Slayer's jump attack hitbox. Yeah, no shenanigans going on with this thing's running attack. One of the really deceptive ones is the hand axe. Look at that. Look at that. It is actually way longer than the actual axe head itself. So it's why people like to roll catch with it. It's not as good as the straight swords, but it's not a bad option if you don't want to be using a straight sword. And there's the old kick hitbox. See the reach difference just between the hand axe and a kick. First R1, not too bad. Second one, however, not as good. Running attacks, dreadful. One of the more interesting ones is you have this hitbox on the Black Knight here. Got that big bit on the end of the actual axe head. One thing that a lot of people have realised is, whilst you have gone into the Warcry weapon art, is you can true combo the R1 into the R2s, because you get this little hitbox here. So that's one way you can do it. You can also do it with a left-handed club, but you can do it with just straight with this. So you can, say, have a club in your left hand, because it has a long enough stun, and be like, pop, and then, whoop, and that will true combo as long as you're not hitting walls. Now this one, also very good at roll catching. Dirty stuff. Yeah, the old twin axe is very, very short. And the hitboxes are actually pretty bad on the twin axes. It's only at the front when you're spinning that people can get around you fairly easy. This guy, very short, but good slam. Look at the size of the slam on the great axes. This is why a lot of people without shields struggle to move in on axes. Because look at that. Look at the size of that. It's double the model. It's like a model size each side of it. And even one-handed. This one's best used in your left hand because it's actually slightly further. But you can put something like a club or a rapier in your left hand, then true combo it into the right hand. So it's open to whichever way you like to use it, really. But yeah, big stun hitbox. So you're going to need to be rolling to not get staggered by that. Terribly easy to avoid weapon art there. This, of course, can go as well. And if you notice, the great hammers on their R1s have a nice little stun hitbox when they slam down. You don't see as much on the ultra great swords. Yeah, here are these tricky R2 hitboxes. Look at that. And the speed that you can then follow that up into an R1. This, of course, a true combo as well. Not the R2, just thrown in that. Not got the stats list, but can I get the weapon art off without the normal stats? The hitbox. Doesn't look like it. And one of the ones that I noticed was St. Biden's poke. It has that little spearhead, but contrary to popular belief, it's not as wide as initially I thought. Because one of the rumours that had always gone round was this had a wider disjointed hitbox, and the disjointed part is actually the orb. So you don't actually need to hit them with the spear, you only need to hit them with the orb. But this is a property shared by all spears. So everyone look at the little gimmicky running weapon art. And the St. Biden is in fact no better. Exact same, and it has that little weird orb on the end of the spear. But look how tiny the hitbox is for the follower's javelin. That takes a lot of effort to hit with. Like, the normal R1s have that little orb on them, so they're even better. So yeah, spears on a bad connection, this is why they're so hard to avoid, because of that little orb on the tip of them. And if you look at the length of the gargoyle flames, it actually goes beyond the poke to get a little bit on the tip. This is again why it's so hard to avoid these spears. You need to get around the tip. We do that. Go the hitbox of the... Quite small as well. However, this one, a little bit wider, so it's easier to hit people with. Get this a little bit closer. Now if you look at the way that the halberds sort of come down, you're going to see the difference in some of them here. See, they've got this kind of like lamp-hole sort of shape, but then you look at something like the split leaf, and it's quite a fair bit wider, which makes it harder to avoid. And you've got that little orb hitbox in front of you as well, of the split leaf, which is, again, why this one is so unique. And now you've also got the true combo in the split leaf, which is the R1, L1, R1. And that spear you get around you really pushes out your hitbox. They have halberds, when they come in, you need to avoid that vertical and that slam, because if you can run around that, they are very easy to punish. So you need to get to their side or to their back to get them. But look, so for everyone that's always rolled behind this, this is why it still catches you. It gives that big explosion. That is an absolutely huge AoE hitbox. So it also depends on which one you get, is if you can successfully backstab it. Now this is one that people are interested in. Again, it has that little orb, which is why this long baby is quite difficult to deal with. if you notice, if you're not blocking when you run, and this is buffed, it goes even longer during that running attack. But if you're holding block when you do it, you don't get that. But when you're not blocking, you do. Now, what's funny is if you look at the normal halberd here, you actually have a proper poke. So that you can actually run around and avoid. However, the red-hilted halberd has this weird hammerhead. So this hammerhead hitbox kind of makes it harder to avoid. We put that on our left hand here. That janky, wider hitbox. Scorpion Scythe has an interesting hitbox. If you slow the frames down, you can see that it's got some properties that are a little bit different from the other side as you're coming through it. But the actual disjointed hitbox is a lot smaller than I thought it was. Then if we compare that to the regular side, that's a slightly cleaner hitbox. Again, pictures are on the Twitter so you can see it easier. I don't have the int, so you won't see that part of the weapon up, but the rest of it, the reason you don't see a hitbox for the left scythe is because I don't have the int requirement, so it doesn't do it. Such a deceptive hitbox. Can't be parried. That second art one has a wide old hitbox. You can see that mannequin claws are actually much longer. One of the interesting ones is the hitbox of exploding bolts. So you've got your scatter shot, and you've got your old exploding bolts. And if you see how big that explosion goes, and how long it lingers, that's the reason that these are so hard to avoid. Gotta love FromSoft balance. Yeah, sometimes you get caught when you get behind it, as if you're touching their body there. Lastly, I just wanted to show off some spell hitboxes here. Oh, and also reprisals. They have a fairly big old explosion. There you got the black flames. See, it actually comes out in a little orb that hits them before it explodes. Got your Chaos Bed Vestiges, spins before it explodes. Got your Fire Surge stream, so when people are trying to avoid it, these are the little ticks they need to avoid. Throwing hands. There's some other spells. So we have Firewhip. And I miss being able to turn this. That used to be so good, because you used to be able to make combos. But they seem to scatter into a pattern. It's a bit random. Flame Fan has a hitbox in front and one for the little fires that come out as well. One of the reasons why it catches quite well. Big old explosion hitbox. Yeah. I'm going to leave it there. There's many more to look at and explore, but obviously you can do that yourselves with some of the other ones if you are interested. But hopefully this will help you understand a little bit more about the janky hitboxes in this game and why some things just roll catch better than others. Because some things are just active for way longer, like especially the murky hand side here. Look how long and active in front of you it is to catch this roll hitbox. Whereas this, you're going to have to time it just a little bit better. And then obviously there's the reach restriction as well. Which again, with longer weapons, a little bit easier. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all around next time.